Our brain will answer any question we ask it. Dr. Emory Welch joins us today to talk about motivation, repentance, mental leverage, and focus questions. Enjoy. Welcome to the Illuminate Recovery podcast. We shed light on mental health issues, mental illness, and addiction recovery, ways to cope, manage, and inspire. Beyond the self-care we will discuss, you may need the help of a licensed professional. My name's Kurt Neider. I'm a husband, father, entrepreneur, a handyman, and a student of life. I avoid conflict, I deflect with humor, and I'm fascinated by the human experience.
And I'm Shelley Mangum. I am a clinical mental health counselor, and my favorite role of all times is grandma. I am a seeker of truth, and I feel like life should be approached with tremendous curiosity.
I ask the dumb questions.
I fill in the gaps.
The Illuminate Recovery podcast is brought to you by Illuminate Billing Advocates. Make billing and collection simple with leader in substance abuse and mental health billing services. Verification and analysis of benefits, pre-authorizations, utilization management, accurate claim submission and management, denial and appeal management, and industry-leading reporting. Improve your practice's cash flow and your ability to help your clients with Illuminate Billing Advocates.
Today we are with Dr. Emory Welch. He is an executive coach, trainer, clinical consultant. He wants you to know how to be the best and get better. Dr. Welch helps you become the best version of yourself, optimizes the effectiveness of your executive team, and guides you in creating a satisfying, happy, and thriving family. And Emory, I don't know anyone who doesn't want to be, have happiness and to thrive and to have some satisfaction. So super excited to have you on with Kurt and I today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
You have an extensive background in recovery, and I'm, and with that comes mental health. So I can only imagine how much fun we're going to have talking today. I'm wondering if you could give us a little bit of history of where you started and what led up to, becoming an executive coach.
Wow, that's a big question. So it's kind of interesting. When I first went to university, I was a voice major. And so I was going there. I was attending school on a voice scholarship, and during that time, it was so intense. I realized, okay, I don't want to do that, so I need to do something else. And I went into grad school and ended up getting a job as a mayor, and I put that on my resume that I was a mayor. I was actually a mayor of an apartment community, graduate housing apartment community, and it was a lot of counseling. And I decided, hey, you know what? This is the route I need to go. So I kind of switched and went in that direction. And when I got finished with grad school, I went into private practice, and ultimately I ended up being the CEO of a behavioral health care organization. But my interest really was motivation and how your brain works to help you accomplish what you want to accomplish. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about like goals, like the cessation of addiction, all kinds of things as far as that goes. So that's how my interest that's how my interest started in all this.
That's cool. And I'll tell you that I am absolutely fascinated as well by the way the brain works and the function of it. And I always think about, and I talk about this, Daniel Siegel. Are you familiar with Daniel Siegel's work?
I am, it's on a periphery, but somewhat.
So he has this hand model of the brain, right? And I know everybody can't see, but you use your hand and you make a fist. You put your thumb inside and you make a fist, and that that and all the different parts of the brain, your limbic brain and your cortex, your prefrontal cortex, and all of that stuff, right? And you can see when you close your hand over your thumb how all of the brain starts to integrate. So I am fascinated with the brain. Everything's connected, and all of that information throws through our body. So I can only imagine how much fun you've had with that.
Well, it's been really interesting. When I've studied motivation a lot, and how we attain the things that we attain, and really our brain will answer any question that we ask. It's this is so interesting to me. So the brain will so we're actually motivated in two different ways, basically to towards pleasure and the avoidance of pain. And when it comes to motivation, especially, we're more motivated by the avoidance of pain than we are towards pleasure. So, in other words, if you think about when you're a kid and your parents teach you don't touch the hot stove, right? I mean, if you touched it one time, you would never touch it again.
Not intentionally, anyway.
You're right. Um, but this kind of it's interesting as we work back from that because things are not as concrete as that. But um, when I would work with a group of kids, I would say, look, how many of you love candy? Of course, they would all love candy, and I'd pick out, all right, these are three candy bars. Like, who loves Snickers? Okay, we get the hands raised. They love Snickers. Um, and so you get a couple people of Snickers, and it's almost inevitable that they also hate buttermilk if they've ever tried it. I don't know if you've ever tried buttermilk. My mom loved it. She was from the farm. Most people are repulsed by it, but I would just say to them, I would say that, okay, hey, I'm going to give you the Snickers bar. All you have to do is drink this buttermilk. And of course, oh no, I'm not going to do that. And we would use that really to help them understand the importance of, hey, studying. Yeah, we know when you go home, you want to play video games, right?
That's right.
But let's talk about the bigger pain that you're going to avoid. And this helps us when we're talking about like stopping smoking or any addiction type thing that we just really expand on all the negative consequences. Like when we're thinking about smoking, like, okay, how much does it cost you? What's your X-rays look like? All these things. What does your face look like? Expand that. Make it big and real, and it can motivate you to change behavior. But what's even more interesting is that when we're talking about the brain, is that the brain will answer any question that we ask it. And what happens is, especially when we're sleeping, when you dream or whatever, your brain processes all the information. People are always asking me, what happens? What's going on? Why am I dreaming this, dreaming that? But really, what's going on with dreams is it's your brain compartmentalizing all the information that you've thought about during the day, that you might have seen. You don't even necessarily know, and it turns it into these big stories. But it's processing through, and that's what your brain's doing. And in fact, like when we're in school, especially if you're talking about like college or whatever, and you're studying late at night, you all remember that. You're studying late at night, or you're working on something, and you get so frustrated because you can't figure out, like, okay, I can't. I can't deal with this anymore. I can't figure this out, or whatever. You go to sleep, You wake up in the morning, voila,
Mm.
it's all there. It's all there.
You know how to do it all of a sudden.
It's crazy. I mean, it's just unbelievable how that works. Well, and you all know that, like, I'm just going to bring this, weight loss is is a huge issue in this country. No pun intended. But I mean, it's a big industry. No, I'm all right. And so
Got
for
two in there.
so for counseling, it is too, right? And people will come to me and they'll say, Emory, why can't I lose weight? Or I'm losing weight, but then I can't keep it off, on and on. And I will say to them, like, I'll do the TV therapist. You all know what the TV therapist does. Like, okay, well, what do you think? Right. And they'll tell me, well, I want to work out, but I can't motivate. So I'll lay on the couch. Or I love pasta. Or I like to eat a bag of cookies a day. Or whatever. I got slow metabolism, on and on. And so I'll say to them, I'll say, well, look, sounds like you know the answer, right? And yeah. So I'll ask myself, so how does that, so is that helpful? No, it's not really that helpful. So I will tell them what you're doing is you're asking yourself the wrong question. And this is kind of the key to the whole thing because like I said, our brain will answer any question we ask it. So I'll give them a question. I'll call it a focus question. And I'll assign them a question. And that question is this: how can I become physically fit and enjoy the process? So what's happened? I've done two things here. I've asked them, how can I become physically fit? Because that's actually their outcome. And I can tell by looking at you two that you two are physically fit. So, I mean, that's actually their outcome, is what they want to accomplish. And that's what we really need to focus on, the ultimate end, kind of the end in mind. And then the second part is, how can I enjoy the process? Because Kurt, I'm just saying, you guys know when you go to the gym. I mean, I go to the gym. I'm at the gym 4 or 5 times a week, and the worst time at the gym is the first 2 weeks in January, right? Because
Absolutely, right?
it's totally crowded, and I know, I've learned, okay, just get through this time, and then hey, get through that first part of January, everything's going to be back to normal. So what happens is, you all know this, like, people get in these weight loss programs, and it's like medically managed programs, it's workout programs, it's all these different eating plans, on and on. They're all great, really. I mean, keto's great, vegan's great, yoga's wonderful. All these everything is great. But the problem is, people get into them and they don't like it.
Hmm.
And so they're not going to maintain it. So that's why I add into, how can I enjoy the process? Because that's the main thing. It's almost like, hey, whatever you do is going to work, but as long as you're able to stay with it and love it.
Yeah, I can't relate to the first 2 weeks of the year at the gym because I don't go to the gym. I don't like it
Oh,
the rest of the year, right? But along the point of what you've said, right? I just enjoy being active, right? So I get some of the benefit from doing that. And it's interesting that you talk about, wanting the outcome with not really appreciating or focusing on the process, right? Because for me, when it comes to weight loss or just physical fitness for me, I have come to that point in life where I realize the outcome can't be the thing you want exclusively, or it's never going to be successful. You have to say, what's the lifestyle required in order to have the outcome that you want? And is that the lifestyle that you want, right? Is that a lifestyle you can enjoy? Is that one you can maintain? Because for me, I don't have time or interest in going to the gym every day, right? But like being active, so I can figure out how to be active and fit that into my life. The motivation part that you're talking about is super interesting, especially when it becomes, down to addiction and some of those things that are a little bit different, because, in the addiction community, you always hear, like, oh, you have to hit rock bottom first, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
somebody's not going to get help until they hit rock bottom or whatever. And what would be intriguing when, with the information that you've got and the understanding you've got about motivation would be, how do you increase that motivation? How do you help get away from the just fear? And, because a lot of times those things are based around a lack of hopelessness or shame or, personal emotional challenges and problems, as opposed to being able to see, oh, if I get out of my addiction, I'm going to be able to have this life of recovery or whatever. For most people, when they're in addiction, they just can't see that, right? That's an impossibility to them. And that's part of why they've got to get to the bottom. So how do you kind of paint that picture and help someone see the end before, they're at crisis,
Boy, that's an excellent question, Kurt. And you're right on. I mean, that's kind of I guess the old pervasive view, like you got to hit rock bottom. I don't really buy into that, but that is what's kind of that is that's the message that's out there. That's what you're saying, that you got to hit rock bottom. And really what that means is you've got to be at the point where you're wanting to turn around. So so you've heard of the word repentance, right? Repent. So the actual meaning of that is repent means that you just turn around and you head in another direction. So let's say you wade and you're waist deep in the mud and you repent. Well, you turn around, you're still waist deep in the mud. Now you're just heading out. And you don't have to be underwater to turn around. You just have to gain what we call mental leverage. So mental leverage is that you have to explode the pain in your brain, because that you're motivated more to avoid pain than you are pleasure. So if you can expand that in your head to a large degree, you can be motivated to make the changes that you need to make.
So Emory, I've got a question on that idea that, we are motivated to avoid pain more so than we're motivated for pleasure. So if we take the example of working out, especially in January 1st, right, is painful. And those first few days, that first full week is pretty painful. So how do you use, that concept to get past the pain that comes from those first, couple of weeks of working out?
Well, you make the pain more significant than the pleasure. So somebody's going to look and they're going to think, hey, you know what? This is the pleasure of it. I'd love to have a six pack. I'd love to look good on the beach or whatever. That's that's the pleasure part of it. The pain part of it, though, is if your doctor tells you you keep going this way, you're going to die of a heart attack. You're going to be you're if you don't change the way you're eating, you're going to have diabetes. We're going to chop off your feet. We're, I mean, really, when people realize, okay, this is what, like, if somebody came to you today and they said, Shelly, if you keep eating the way you're eating, we're going to amputate your feet in a couple of weeks. But if you want to keep your feet, this is what you need to do. You probably do it.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah. Yeah. You probably would if you really believed that, because now that's pain that you're not wanting to experience.
Yeah.
And it's the same way. I mean, that's just an example, but it's like that with everything. And that's how we're designed.
Hmm. Well, you mentioned that the brain will go after anything we put in it, right? Whatever we tell it to go
Correct.
after, it's a hard working machine for us if we program it properly. I think is a good way to say that. And I think writers, I've heard that writers will use that concept. They'll be looking for an idea or trying to expand an idea, or they want to write something, and they'll put that in their mind, and then they might take a little walk, or they might lay down for a little nap. And often, when they wake up, or maybe it's a day later, they'll have the answer to what they're looking for because they put it in their mind and their mind went to work to find the answer for that. Is that the same kind of concept you're talking about?
Yes. I don't know if you all are familiar with Napoleon Hill.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote The Laws of Success, but he also, The Laws of Success, a big, huge book. I don't know, just nobody can see us, right?
No.
Okay, I can
It's a
show you
big,
the book,
thick
but
book.
it looks like a dictionary. I've got it off to the side of me. But he also wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not really about getting rich, it's more about um, a focus or a chief aim. And it's about what you put in your head. Okay, I want to focus on this, and you actually accomplish that. Even, you know how people say, okay, set a goal and then create a game plan. You're going to take these steps, yada yada yada. All right. And his premise was that a lot of times we know what we want, but we don't know how to get there. But we try to create some kind of a plan and all these steps, and we may be trying to do 15 steps when we only need 3, and step 5 and 6 may actually derail us. So really it's to ask yourself the right question. And how I implement this, like I want to go back to the question that we were talking about. So what I would say, um, if you were Shelley, if you were going to do this, I would say, Shelley, write this question on a sticky note and put it beside your bed. And what I want you to do is I want you to read that question out loud right before you go to sleep, and don't try to answer it. Just read it out loud. And then the first thing in the morning, you read it out loud again, and you don't try to answer it. Um, and that's kind of difficult. It's like it's like if I say, don't think of a blue elephant, you think of a blue elephant. But um, right, but if you just read that question out loud and then you go to sleep, your brain's going to take care of that for you. So I call those focus questions.
That's
Um,
impressive. I imagine that you use that in your executive coaching. Do you use a lot of those concepts in that practice?
Absolutely. So when we talk about uh, executive coaching, I mean, I was a CEO for 18 years. And when I was a young CEO, I had a concentration on specific things. But what I learned when I became more seasoned is the most important thing it was the development of my executive team. Because the more you develop your executive team and the more effective they are, then you don't really have to do a lot as a CEO. You're going to be successful. And so that kind of directed me into that area of executive coaching. But yeah, it's really working with folks to help them to understand these are the questions that I need to ask, because what generally can happen that derails you when it comes to team development, when it comes to vision casting, um, even crisis management or risk taking, all of that, working with contractors and experts, all that. It's about knowing, okay, this is a question I need to ask.
Mm. Are you familiar with Maxwell Maltz's book Psycho-Cybernetics?
Yes.
That's an incredible book, and it reminds me of some of the concepts you're talking about. He suggests that there's two things you can set your mind to do: either look for the solution that you don't know the answer to, or to look for what is it? To look for an answer that you don't know, and to look for clarification, or to do this, this intention like you're talking about. He
Right.
tells in that book about an executive who has a meeting with a kind of a hard-nosed guy that has a lot of power, and he's got to do this deal with him. Do you remember that? He writes a letter into Maxwell, and he says, hey, he says, I practice this the theater of the mind concept that Maxwell developed. And he said, I practiced this. He said, I didn't dare tell anybody what I was doing because they would have, hauled me off to the crazy hospital. But he says, for 2 weeks, I learned everything I could know about this guy. And I studied everything. I looked at his news clippings. I looked at everything I could about this guy. And I started to imagine in my mind what this conversation was going to go like. And a lot of money was based on this meeting, this one time meeting. And so for 2 weeks, he would just go over it and over it. And he said even one time he found himself slamming his hand down on the table and making his point, and he would defend himself. And he said the interesting thing was that when he went into that meeting, he said it almost went verbatim how he had played it out in his mind over the last 2 weeks. And he got the deal, and it was really cool, right? And you would go, wow, who would imagine that you could do that? But it's really powerful this concept you're talking about.
Yes. Wow. And that's a good example. And I did read that book, and that's been, gosh, back in a long time ago, probably 30 years ago. So I didn't remember that exact example, but we use this in sports psychology as well.
Mm.
That that you back into a feeling by playing it out. So, for instance, so if you're familiar with basketball, I'm sure,
Mm-hmm.
and they're shooting slumps, right? So guys that go through shooting slumps. So just imagine a guy's going through a shooting slump, uh, from the free throw line, basically. And so what we do is we get with this guy, and when he is in practice hitting these free throws, 30 in a row or whatever, um, what we do is instead of having him think about the shot, we have him think about what's everything else, what's going through your mind, what are you doing exactly with your hands, with your feet, what's your breathing like, all of these external things. And you're thinking about, okay, this is what we want him to concentrate on, not whether he's making the shot or not.
Right. And it
Uh,
helps to take them out of their head, right? Because they're stuck in their head. I'm not going to make this. I'm not going to make this.
right, exactly. You miss a shot, it gets worse. I mean, and this is with these guys that are 3-point specialists as well. Oh, you miss a couple shots, now you can't hit anything. So it's to take it away from that and to back into a feeling, because it's all about feel.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way it is in a lot of things. It's all about feel. And so we want them to back into that feeling. You can do this actually. You can get rid of depression and anxiety this way. I don't know if you all have heard of it, but back in the day when they were, gosh, this was probably in the 60s, but it's what called the SMILE study that was done out in a facility out in in California. So these folks they actually suffered from bipolar disorder, and they didn't really know they were misdiagnosed, but they were just depressed to the point that they couldn't get out of bed. They couldn't. They didn't want to eat, go to the bathroom, nothing, do anything. And so what they did, these researchers, without using any medication at all, these people are all in bed, and they just said, okay, we want you to do a full face smile for 5 minutes. So they do this big full face smile, and while they were in that smile, they couldn't feel bad.
Mm.
And so it would actually motivate them to get out of bed and eat. Now, once they stopped the smiling, right, within a few minutes, they were back in their depressed state. But what we learned is that we could create new brain maps. So theoretically, if they could have kept smiling that way for 24 hours, they would have been totally healed, basically, from their depression. But what it did teach us is that we can back into the feelings that we want to get simply by using our breathing and our physical bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like okay, when you're overcome with sadness or happiness or fear, for instance, it can cause you to cry. That's a physical reaction
Mm-hmm.
to those emotions. And it just shows us how connected our bodies and our emotions are. And we can use this when we treat anything from addiction, depression, anxiety. This is a key thing to be able to use, because everybody has had the experience of feeling the way they want to experience. And we can back them right into it.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. And these concepts that you're sharing with us are very powerful as well. And as an executive coach, I imagine that you've helped a lot of people accomplish the things that they're after. I'm wondering if our listeners, if you could let our listeners know how they could get a hold of you so that they can learn more and they can possibly work with you.
Oh, thank you. Yes, absolutely. I think probably the easiest way to connect with me is Dr. Emory Welch on LinkedIn. Um, that's an easy thing so that people don't have to remember a website. But my website is execexcel.com. So it's like executive, and then Excel is XCELL.com. www.execexcel.com. But of course, if you go on to LinkedIn, then it would take you to my website. Dr. Emory Welch. That's Emory. I always tell people it's Emory, like the university they named after me.
That's incredible. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I know that you have a ton of wisdom. You could teach us for hours and hours, and I feel bad that we don't have all that amount of time. But thank you, and I am absolutely sure people will be interested in learning more. Thanks for being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much, Shelley and Kurt. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Emory.